My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for the past 3 years, I've been living a double life. To the employees of Anderson Consulting Group, I was just another executive assistant, competent but unremarkable, invisible but efficient. What they didn't know was that I was also the secret CEO of their largest client, Global Tech Innovations, a $2.3 billion technology company. The story of how I ended up in this unique position started 5 years ago when my uncle Richard, the founder of Global Tech, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. During his final months, he made a decision that would shock the business world if they had known about it. "Sarah," he said during one of our private meetings in his home office, "I'm naming you as my successor." I nearly dropped my tablet. "Uncle Richard, I'm not even in the technology sector. I'm an executive assistant." He smiled, the same smile that had appeared on countless business magazine covers. "You're also a Stanford MBA graduate who chose to learn business from the ground up instead of taking shortcuts to the top. You've spent 7 years observing how executives operate, learning their strengths and weaknesses. And most importantly, you understand people, not just strategies and spreadsheets. But the board will expect me to name Thomas as CEO," he finished, referring to his ambitious CFO. "That's why we're going to do things differently." His plan was brilliant in its simplicity. On paper, he would appoint Thomas as the public face of global tech. But the real control, the majority shares, and executive power would pass to me through a complex series of trusts and legal arrangements. I would continue working as an executive assistant elsewhere, observing and learning, while secretly guiding Global Tech's major decisions through encrypted communications and private meetings disguised as regular shareholder updates. "Give yourself 3 years," Uncle Richard advised. "Learn everything you can about how our competitors think and operate. Then, when the time is right, take your rightful place." After he passed away, everything proceeded according to his plan. Thomas preened for the cameras and took credit for Global Tech's success, never realizing that every major decision came from the major shareholder representative he met with quarterly. I took a job at Anderson Consulting, our biggest external contractor, watching and learning how consulting firms operated from the inside. For 3 years, I played my role perfectly. I made coffee runs, scheduled meetings, and filed reports, all while secretly directing a multi-billion-dollar company. I sat quietly in meetings while Anderson's executives discussed strategies for managing global tech, never realizing that the person they were trying to manipulate was right there taking notes. Everything was going according to plan until James Anderson Jr., the founder's son, decided to show his leadership by cutting costs. "We need to trim the fat," he announced during a company-wide meeting, starting with redundant support staff. I knew what was coming. James had never forgiven me for correcting his mathematical error in front of a client last month. It didn't matter that I'd saved the company from a potentially embarrassing mistake. In his mind, I had humiliated him. The summons to HR came 3 days later. James was there, lounging in his expensive chair, a smirk playing on his face. "Miss Mitchell," he began, clearly savoring the moment, "we're restructuring the support staff. Your position has been eliminated." I maintained my professional smile. "I see. May I ask why?" "Let's be honest. You're just a secretary. Easily replaceable. We can get a temp to do your job for half the cost." Linda from HR shifted uncomfortably. She had witnessed my mistake with James's numbers. "And the Wilson account?" I asked innocently. "I've been managing their communications for the past year." James waved his hand dismissively. "Anne from the pool can handle it. Along with the Miller portfolio," and he checked his notes, "Global Tech Innovations. Just forward all your contacts and files before you leave today." I thought about the encrypted phone in my bag, the one that connected me directly to Global Tech's board. About the major contract renewal meeting scheduled for Monday morning. A meeting James didn't even know about yet. "Of course," I said pleasantly, "though you might want to check your emails Monday morning. There could be some changes coming." "Is that a threat?" James leaned forward, his smirk turning ugly. "From a secretary?" "Not at all. Just a professional courtesy." As security escorted me out, James's petty final touch, I heard the whispers and snickers from my former colleagues. 3 years of subtle condescension and dismissal, all because they couldn't see past their own assumptions. In my car, I finally allowed myself to smile as I pulled out my encrypted phone. Time to make some calls. First to Thomas, Global Tech's public CEO. Move the board meeting to 8 a.m. Monday. And Thomas, wear your best suit. Changes are coming. Then to Maria Chen, my trusted legal counsel who had helped Uncle Richard set up the original arrangement. It's time. Prepare the announcement. Finally to Marcus Wong, Global Tech's head of communications. Remember that contingency press release we prepared. Update it and be ready for Monday morning. That weekend was surreal. While my former colleagues at Anderson probably imagined me crying over my lost job, I was in a series of high-level meetings, finalizing the details of my emergence as Global Tech's true CEO. The timing is perfect, Maria noted during our Sunday strategy session. Anderson's contract is up for renewal, and after reviewing their recent work, it should have been reviewed months ago, I finished. They've been overcharging us by millions while delivering subpar results. I've documented everything. Marcus looked up from his notes. The press will have a field day with this. The secret CEO storyline. The corporate comeuppance. How do you want to play it? I thought about James's smirk, about 3 years of being underestimated and dismissed. Let's keep it professional. This isn't about revenge, it's about good business. But as I reviewed the files I collected over 3 years, the inflated invoices, the padded expenses, the strategic errors that always seemed to benefit Anderson, I had to admit that a small part of me was looking forward to Monday morning. The announcement was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp. I spent Sunday night in my apartment, preparing for the moment I would finally step out of the shadows. Uncle Richard's last letter to me sat on my desk, open to his final piece of advice. The best leaders aren't the ones who demand respect, they're the ones who earn it through their actions. Show them why I chose you, Sarah. Show them what real leadership looks like. I picked up my phone to make one last call to Linda in HR at Anderson. She deserved a heads up, if only for her obvious discomfort during my firing. Linda, this is Sarah Mitchell. About those files James wanted me to transfer. Tell him he might want to watch the business news tomorrow morning. And Linda, you might want to update your resume. Things are about to change at Anderson Consulting. Monday morning dawned clear and crisp. I arrived at Global Tech's headquarters at 7 a.m., wearing a suit that cost more than my supposed monthly salary as a secretary. Maria met me in the underground parking garage, tablet in hand. Everything's ready, she confirmed. Thomas is already in his office, practicing his surprised but supportive expression. The board members have all arrived early. They're curious about this emergency meeting. I smiled, checking my watch. And Anderson Consulting. James Anderson Jr. just arrived at their offices. Apparently, he has a 9 a.m. meeting scheduled to discuss streamlining their Global Tech account team. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. At 7:55 a.m., I walked into Global Tech's main boardroom. The board members looked up, confusion crossing their faces at seeing an unfamiliar woman enter their private meeting. Who are you? Gerald Matthews, the longest-serving board member, demanded. Someone you've been meeting with quarterly for the past 3 years, I replied, taking my seat at the head of the table, though you knew me as Richard's successor and majority shareholder representative. The room erupted in whispers. Thomas, who had been standing by the window practicing his camera-ready smile, turned pale. At exactly 8 a.m., Marcus activated the press release. Simultaneously, Maria distributed folders to each board member containing detailed documentation of my ownership, legal authority, and 3-year track record of decision-making. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. My name is Sarah Mitchell. 3 years ago, my Uncle Richard made me his successor and Global Tech's majority shareholder. Since then, I've been directing this company's major decisions while observing our industry from a unique perspective. Today, I'm stepping into my role publicly as CEO. The next 30 minutes were intense. Questions flew, documents were scrutinized, lawyers were called. But Uncle Richard's arrangements were ironclad, and my track record spoke for itself. Under my hidden leadership, Global Tech's value had increased by 45%. At 8:45 a.m., we moved to our first order of business. As my first public act as CEO, I announced, I'm terminating our contract with Anderson Consulting Group, effective immediately. The recent performance review, which you'll find in your packets, shows systematic overcharging, strategic incompetence, and a pattern of attempted manipulation that ends today. I nodded to Marcus, who displayed the morning's business news headlines on the main screen. Global TCH Innovations REVAL's CEO. Richard CHN's NEC emerges as TCH Giants Heidegin LEADA. Anderson Kilman Siwa Tainji, those is $50 million contracts the Amad LED Aorsteva PREVLH on. At 8:55 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Linda at Anderson. OMG, James just saw the news. He's completely lost it. I could imagine the scene unfolding at Anderson Consulting. James preparing for his 9 a.m. meeting, suddenly discovering that the easily replaceable secretary he'd fired was actually the CEO of his biggest client, the same client whose contract he just lost. By 10 a.m., Anderson's stock had dropped 17%. By noon, their board had called an emergency meeting. By 2 p.m., James Anderson Jr. had been asked to take an indefinite leave of absence. But I wasn't focused on Anderson's implosion. I spent that day meeting with Global Tech's employees, department by department, explaining my vision for the company's future. The initial shock of my revelation quickly turned to excitement as people realized what this meant. Their CEO had spent 3 years in the trenches, understanding their challenges firsthand. You really made coffee runs and filed reports, one junior developer asked during the IT department meeting. And took notes, scheduled meetings, and fixed printer jams, I confirmed. I believe you can't lead effectively unless you understand every level of your organization. The press coverage was intense. Business magazines scrambled to tell the story of the undercover CEO who had learned her company's business from the ground up. Women's business forums celebrated my unconventional path to leadership. Even my critics had to admit that the strategy had been brilliant. What better way to understand your industry than to work unnoticed inside one of your major contractors? 1 week after my revelation, I received an unexpected visitor. Linda from Anderson's HR department came to my office, clutching a folder. I've been going through the personnel files, she said. The pattern of dismissals under James, it wasn't just you. Dozens of competent people, mostly women and minorities, pushed out because they didn't fit his image of success. I reviewed the documentation she'd brought. Are you willing to make this official? She straightened her spine. Yes, it's time for things to change. That meeting led to my second major initiative as CEO. Global Tech established a partnership program for small, diverse-owned consulting firms, specifically targeting those started by former Anderson employees who had been unfairly dismissed. Within 6 months, we had a more effective, innovative, and diverse consulting network than Anderson had ever provided, at half the cost. Thomas adapted surprisingly well to his reduced role, especially after I acknowledged his public relations skills and made him our chief brand officer. You're much better at being the face of Global Tech than I am, I told him. I prefer focusing on strategy and operations. 1 year later, Global Tech's value had increased another 30%. Anderson Consulting, meanwhile, had undergone a complete restructuring. James never returned from his leave of absence, and the company's new leadership had implemented strict ethical guidelines and diversity initiatives, though they never regained their position with Global Tech. The secret CEO story became a business school case study. I was asked to give lectures about my unconventional path to leadership, about the value of understanding every level of your organization, about the dangers of underestimating people based on their titles. The best view of a company isn't always from the top, I told a graduating class at Stanford Business School. Sometimes you need to step out of the corner office and see how things work on the ground. Uncle Richard's portrait now hangs in our headquarters lobby. Below it is his favorite quote, "True leadership isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about understanding, empathy, and the courage to do things differently." Last month, I hired a new executive assistant. She's brilliant with degrees in both business and computer science. During her interview, she asked why I was hiring someone so overqualified for an assistant role. I smiled, thinking about my own journey. Let's just say I have a different perspective on the potential of executive assistants. Tell me, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The business world had learned its lesson about underestimating just a secretary. But for me, the most satisfying moment came much earlier, on that first Monday morning when I received one final text from Linda. James just tried to call Global Tech to smooth things over with the CEO. His face when they put you on the line. Priceless. Thank you for showing us all what real leadership looks like. I keep that message saved, not out of spite, but as a reminder that true success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Uncle Richard had taught me that leadership isn't about power or titles. It's about understanding, empathy, and the courage to see potential where others see only prejudices. Today, global tech is more than just a successful company. It's a testament to the power of looking beyond titles and appearances, of valuing substance over status. And somewhere, I know Uncle Richard is smiling, proud that his unconventional succession plan did more than just prepare a new CEO. It helped transform an entire industry's understanding of what leadership truly means.